I am Craig Schaefer. Welcome to the virtual CISO moment. Daniel Burgoon joins us today. He is the founder and on-demand CISO at K2 Cybersecurity Advisory. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Greg, thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
I appreciate you filling in for a last minute cancellation. So thank you so much. It's always good to try to keep the weekly ones rolling. So, but I'm excited to hear from you. I actually met you from just going through this process. A fellow fractional CISO. We'll love diving into all that. But first, I want to hear about how and why you got started in information security, and just bring us through your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Greg. Again, I'm Dan Burgoon. I'm the founder of K2 Cybersecurity Advisory. I've spent over 2 decades in information security. I'd like to kind of look at it as 2 halves. The first really focusing on security assessment and technology audit. So a lot of work assessing federal agencies in the DC area, as well as for large financial institutions in that same region. And about midpoint in my career, I made the pivot toward actually learning to manage at first, and then taking over global security programs and running the transformation across all the countries that we operated in. Had the good fortune of doing that for Fortune 500 and a Fortune 150 before launching K2 a couple of years ago, to really bring that expertise to bear for the mid-market. So I really think there's a huge demand for late-stage startups through mid-sized enterprise, where they don't necessarily have deep security leadership expertise. And like every other organization, they're sitting in a asymmetric position in terms of security risk, right?
So going from being full-time to becoming an entrepreneur. Now, I think looking through your LinkedIn, you did a little bit of, you owned a consulting company for a bit beforehand too.
Yeah, that's right.
But what kind of challenges did you find doing that? And let me kind of bring this into context that when I started vCISO services, I had been paid by somebody else for close to 30 years, and I never thought about being independent. It scared the wazoo out of me to even think about it, but it was a calling. Just talk a little bit through the thought process that you went through for some who may be thinking about making that leap.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that left an early impression on me, even before I got into InfoSec. When I was interning at my final semester or final summer of college, right? I was interning with a very technical group at Siemens Medical Systems, and I was put on a task to really kind of these were technical engineers that were having tickets come in from all over the country and by ticket type. And so I was asked, hey, intern, can you slice and dice and provide some graphics around incoming tickets by region, by type? And I pulled that together, right, and turned it in. The next day, I sit down at my desk in the morning. I go, hey, where's so-and-so? They go, oh, they went to meet with the manager. I said, oh, that's great. Yeah, he said he was super excited. And then a few hours later, we realized this individual was let go. And I looked at my my graphics, and he happened to be the lowest ticket volume. So I was imprinted early on in my career, that I think full-time work is a fallacy anymore. So it really didn't, both times that I have struck out as an entrepreneur, it didn't really seem as a risk to me. It's not our grandparents' world where you stay at one company, and so really I didn't really look at it with the lens of risk.
Well, one of the things that I like to tell people is that really it's almost exactly the same, except that when you're working as an employee, you're a consultant with a client base of one, basically. And if you go out as a consultant and have part-time clients, then you kind of, if you want to talk about risk, you actually spread the risk out. So if you
Yeah.
lose one, you still, if you have 5 equal clients, you only lose 20% of your income, not 100%, whether or not you decide to leave or they decide, to go elsewhere. Um,
Yeah.
but I've heard two different terms, and I know reading through, you had posted um, a piece of marketing for your firm about trying to trigger why businesses may want to consider having a fractional CISO. And so I've heard the term fractional CISO before. I've heard the term virtual CISO before. I have my opinion, but I want to hear first your opinion without selling your opinion with mine. Is there a difference between the two, or has the field evolved to basically mean the same thing?
So I'm not 100% sure. Fractional is pretty, to me, like self-explanatory, whereas vCISO or virtual CISO could mean, I think, a couple different things, and it could be fractional. It could be on a project basis to get a company compliant with something. So I do look at maybe vCISO as a bit more of a broader term that could encompass fractional CISO. But that's just my take on it. I think a lot of times they're used interchangeably.
Yeah, I know. I think you're spot on with the way that things have evolved. I've been of the opinion that there's in the virtual CISO space, if you scroll back 7 or 8 years ago, it truly was, I think, like more of a fractional CISO type deal, where you had the someone like yourself who had CISO experience that was then giving that experience or providing that experience to SMBs. Whereas now it's become such a broad term that it's very muddied. And I think that it does confuse the base out there. So I've been of the opinion that the vCISO land is in the process of splitting. And I think that it's to where you have like the fractional CISO part, as you said, the full risk experience suite, and then the virtual CISO, which is more of like a broader cyber infosec consultory. So I think you're spot on with it. And I think that actually starting to use the term fractional at this point in time may make more sense. Or I don't know how it's going to evolve, but they're definitely splitting. Do you see that?
Yeah, possibly. I mean, you've maybe been at this longer than I have. I think the most important part is the CISO part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Does the, because there's a lot of managed security service providers out there, or other kind of more ancillary services than offering vCISO offerings. And sometimes they're getting high caliber people like you and I, and sometimes it's just an analyst, filling in a void for their client that might be a small, medium-sized business, because the MSP wants to have that service offering. So I think the CISO part is really the value behind experienced security leaders like you and I that have risen to an executive level, and then can bring to bear that for the small and medium-sized market, where you know how to get them to the next level. You know what good looks like, and then you're not just kind of working off of a compliance checklist or super technical in the weeds.
Yeah, I think you said it perfectly, and I think that that's one thing that small and mid-sized businesses need to understand, that at the very least, whatever the service is called, make sure that you vet it to ensure that you're getting that CISO level experience behind it. I mean,
Yeah.
they may not want it actually. There may be some SMBs that they just want to become compliant. I'm famous for saying on this podcast and elsewhere that my firm, we won't take on clients like that. If you just want to be compliant with something, that's fine. There's a whole bunch of people out there that'll help you. We want to build security programs, like I'm sure you do too.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going around, especially I think one of the biggest challenges for emerging companies, especially if they're tech startups, is they want to go after enterprise customers, and the enterprise customers want secure solutions. But when you're a tech startup, you're trying to get a minimum viable product and get the ball rolling on the commercial side. And so those two kind of opposing needs end up with the situation we have with like SOC 2, where you have a race to the bottom, and some vendors out there just kind of maybe like sidestepping what the AICPA really meant for a SOC 2 to be.
Yeah.
That's where I think, and I've had folks come up to me and say, hey, we just need like SOC 2 policies. Can you make us SOC 2 policies? And they're InfoSec. I said, hey, they're InfoSec policies that support your SOC 2. There's no such thing as SOC 2 policies. But as a startup, I can understand, right? Like they're just trying to cheaply get market access, and there's some of those lower tier attestation companies that will just go and do it. So that I think is an interesting kind of nuance in the market today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is can be considered like a risk to small and mid-sized businesses to somewhat of an extent, where they, even the term SOC 2 compliance is incorrect. It's an attestation. It's
That's right.
Every time I see we're SOC 2 compliant, really? I mean, where did that come from?
And the marketing team.
Yeah, and there's some good marketing teams out there. So that's one risk for small and mid-sized businesses. But you're working a lot with them now, and I love also the fact that you have experience across the entire spectrum. You've got global CISO, and you've got down to the small.
Yeah.
I never had that privilege of really being a large organization CISO. I mean, the largest, I guess, 10,000 employees with the city of Nashville, but it wasn't global by definition. Really.
Yeah,
that was pretty large.
Yeah,
but what's outside of not understanding that the SOC 2 is not a measure of compliance? what is a couple of the more significant InfoSec risks today that you've seen for SMBs out there, and what they can maybe do about it?
So I think any organization or individual, for that matter, with connectivity to the internet is in this asymmetric position with regard to protecting their privacy, protecting their securing their computing environment, securing their credentials, with attackers, threat actors that are the ones who are picking the time and place and target, whereas the individual and company is kind of the target waiting for something to happen. The difference with small and medium-sized business is the sophistication, leadership, resources, and tooling to be able to prevent and react to it. So I think that would be number one from an actual security risk profile, that they're generally less prepared to prevent, detect, and respond to the same threats that large organizations are spending millions on to address that risk.
Now, that's something that ideally the MSSP market is hoping to fill, correct?
It fills. I mean, that's an essential part of any small and medium-sized business. Like, they're probably having an MSP do their technology, right? Mm-hmm. And if not, they should be, regardless, outsourcing to a MSSP or MDR provider. The MSSPs, I mean, I think there's a lot of them out there, big and small, that are very, they're ticket farms. They're not necessarily connecting the dots. Multiple attacks on the same system the alerts might go to different people in the SOC, and nobody's going, hey, oh, that's a medium, we can wait 60 minutes to do something, when there's 6 mediums that went off on the same asset, there's obviously something going on there. So I'm a big proponent of, up and coming managed detection and response providers that are founded by people that are longtime industry veterans that went out into the marketplace with a purpose, right? They saw the big providers and they go, hey, this didn't work when I was a CISO. It didn't work in my consulting career for my clients. Now it's time to provide something where, hey, maybe you get a dedicated team instead of random people just lobbing alerts over to you, a dedicated team to get to know your environment. So I think that's truly important. You really have to leverage your resources well. And I do believe, plug, vCISO, fractional CISO, somebody's got to be connecting the dots, because your MSP and your security monitoring service are only going to monitor what you tell them to. Mm-hmm. So if the business is standing up new things in the cloud, spinning up new applications, and the MSP or the monitoring provider isn't aware, it takes somebody on the inside of a business to connect those dots and make sure as a whole that the entity is secure, not just what's being ingested into a SIM tool.
So how can a fractional CISO, how can a fractional CISO help with that particular gap there?
I mean, I always start with the executive team, like fully understanding the business model. Mm-hmm. Where's the revenue coming from? What's the cost structure look like? Who are the key partners? What's the technology environment look like? What do they consider a likely threat event? Like if somebody were to go after this company, what would that look like? What would hurt them the most? And what's a material number for you guys that we need to kind of take into account when we're looking at your risk profile, the types of data that you store, the types of transactions that you process. And so I think it starts with engaging with the executive team before you start getting into the nuts and bolts of technology and security.
That's a great point. And we were talking earlier about that small, mid-sized business, really, if they start hearing the term fractional CISO or vCISO, they need to understand what it is that is out there, but also what it is that they're looking for. So if they're looking for someone to basically be more technical, then maybe one of your InfoSec analyst vCISO type service might be more appropriate. Yeah. But a true security leader is going to consider the finance impact and also how the risk dovetails with the overall risk management and tolerance of the organization. So I think you're spot on with going and starting with the executive level. So small and mid-sized businesses that are listening to this is like that might be where you want to have your priority first.
Yeah, you can't secure what you don't know about, and no matter who's monitoring it, somebody's got to be looking at the organization as a whole, looking at security as an enterprise risk, and getting to know the organization, the business, and pulling that all together.
On the topic of fractional CISO, and don't mean to throw a curveball, but I'll throw it anyway. What's one of the biggest challenges that you have as being a fractional CISO?
Well, I mean, information security can have a lot of unplanned work. So while the retainer might be planned, you don't control the when or why or how of an incident or a sales need or a compliance need that pops up. So yeah, generally time management, expectation management rather than the actual execution of it. And then balancing delivery with business development, I think, is another one, right?
Yeah, I agree with both of them. I was going to opine on the first, but the second one is probably one of the hardest things out there. It's business development is significantly difficult, and I think that those that are thinking about jumping into the field, I caution them to not follow the same idea that I did. It's like, I thought that if I put up my shingle, it's like people could be wanting to flock to me. I mean, come on. I'm Greg Schaefer,
Yeah.
I am a security expert, and it doesn't work that way. So I think that's good points.
Yeah. I mean, in an age of just social media, right, and the loudest gets the most attention, even if you're naturally not like that in your personal life, the business development aspect forces you to kind of come out, learn those that skill set, even if it's not you're not a person on your phone all the time on Instagram and Snapchat all day.
Oh, absolutely. I have to chuckle because, I mean, this podcast was birthed by being a marketing 1-minute video series for down there. I'm trying to point it there, the vCISO logo there.
Yeah.
And I was never one to do this sort of stuff, and now it's I find myself quite comfortable behind the camera and the microphone. But all this stuff can be stressful. I mean, information security is stressful. Being an entrepreneur is stressful. The unplanned scope creep of information security that we as fractional and virtual CISOs need to manage so well. And then, of course, managing the business. What's one of the things you do to get away from all that stress?
What's the rating of this podcast? PG-13 or R? What do we?
It's PG. Otherwise, I got to click other buttons on Spotify.
No, in all seriousness, that's something we all in the InfoSec field really, need to pay attention to. I don't claim to have the perfect answer to that, but taking the time to exercise, taking the time to meditate or personally pray is what I do. Spending time with the family. I'm a big ice hockey fan, and when I do get a chance, I love to play tennis. So those are some of my outlets. But I know this field is tough, and there's never a perfect answer. I would just encourage people to actively nurture their mental health and be conscious when they need to find a healthy outlet for that.
Because when you do that, do you find that, at least I do, that it brings so much clarity during the day? Like, I got up this morning and I was on my stationary bike at 5 o'clock in the morning. And it almost like flushes the entire day.
Yeah, you've probably got it figured out better than I have. I mean, I always when I get busy, I'm probably the worst person to do the things that I need to do to bring that about. So one of these days I'm going to be a 5 a.m. Get up and go run. But
well, I think I just have naturally, like, my hours have changed. It used to be, if you spool back 30 years ago, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock would be when I'd be going to sleep. But but no, there's definitely still room for improvement. But what kind of plans you got coming down the road for K2 or for yourself or?
Yeah, so this is exciting. This is, we're coming up on second year of founding K2 this spring. When you start something like this, there is a ramp up period.
Mm-hmm.
There's, as peaks and valleys. I'm feeling very good about the year ahead. We've picked up some great new clients recently. Implemented some good standard work to be able to drop into a a client environment, quickly assess their needs and their security posture. And we're definitely ramping up the efforts because there's such a huge need in that late stage startup to mid-size enterprise for this, as well as like bringing solutions that you don't have to go RFP off of the Gartner quadrant. Like we can bring proven cost-effective solutions from day one to help you really rapidly change your security and compliance profile. So plans for this year are growth. We're really looking to bring that message to more organizations that can benefit from it to help them see the value, and then partner alongside them to make it happen.
So if someone wants to get a hold of you and K2, what's the best way to do that?
Yes, thanks. Dan at k2ca.com. It's just Dan at k2ca.com. And yeah, would love to have a chat and learn how I might be able to help you out.
Awesome. And website too?
Yeah, k2ca.com.
Okay, very good. Dan, it's been wonderful. I appreciate you taking the time. I very much appreciate you also fighting the good fight to help what is really I still say is the underrepresented part of our field. We don't pay enough attention to the proper needs of small and mid-sized business information security, and you're obviously doing it right and have a passion for it, and I appreciate you for that.
You too, Greg. I couldn't agree more, and really appreciate you having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time, and everybody, stay secure.